kids are great because they don't have the burden of the expectation of, oh my gosh, I should be so much better. They have imagination. They just, let it come out.
Today I have a guest, Stephen Schneider, and we will be discussing his middle grade fiction and a few other topics. Stephen writes as S.A. Schneider, and he is a purveyor of fantasy and a travel guide for kids to explore the many worlds found in books. Anyone who has a wolf should be a writer or fantasy writer, right?
Yes.
So enjoy the adventure. Stephen, welcome to Writing Pursuits. And do you really have a wolf?
Yes. Hi, Kathrese. Yes, actually, I do. His name's Hunter. Hunter Moon is his full name.
Hunter Moon.
Yes.
I love that. Well, the one that you see in the background, her name is Luna. So, or really Stella Luna. She's named after the bat in the,
right.
book.
Right.
And, but we call her Luna all the time. She's like, and then her bro is here down beside me, and his name is Tigger, and he's a big old plot hound. So, they kind of vie over the chair who gets to sit there and who has to lay on the bed.
my boxer's asleep over here, so you may hear some snoring.
That sounds right. Yeah, my writing companions. So what would I do without them? Anyway, so why did you start writing, and what is your most recent project?
I started writing. It was like a lot of writers. I've thought about it forever. I had ideas about 5 years before I started, but I don't think I could do this. I could never write great. And then there were like 3 things that happened all within a week that it was kind of like signs from the universe that, hey, get off your butt. You really should do this. So I listened, and I've been writing since.
So can you share those signs? It sounds so mysterious.
Well, yeah, it was a weird conglomeration. There's one of my all-time favorite video games is called Alan Wake, and it's about this writer who gets kind of sucked into a fantasy dream world, and as he's going through it, he's finding these pages of a book he's never written, and I finished that. And it was a writer, so I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Then I went to this event, and I was at this guy's house, and he had books all over, and we were talking, and we were talking about Stephen King and a few other writers. And then someone pulled me aside, hey, he's like a very famous, popular sci-fi writer. I'm like, no way. And they took me around the corner, and he had like 130 books published, military sci-fi. He's been doing it for 33 years, never even gave a clue or an indication. So I'm like, okay, well, there's 2 happenstance coincidences in the same week. And then I got home that Sunday with the kids, and there was a show on. I'm like, okay, Nathan Fillion is in this show. Let's check it out. And it was Castle. And I'm watching. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's a writer. And I'm like, okay, 3 things within like 4 days on a writing. And I've been thinking about it. So the following week, well, it was actually a couple months. I finally got up the courage, sat down, and I wrote like 15,000 words the first weekend.
Wow. You just had it all pent up, and it had to be,
exactly.
Get out there on the page. Well, that's really cool. I'm a former middle grade reading teacher for English language learners. And so in general, that means I was doing a lot of remediation and also intense instruction because not only were they learning a new language, but they were also, generally speaking, they were not up to grade level on their reading in their own language, regardless of where they were starting, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Vietnamese, they just weren't up to grade level on their reading skills.
Well, that's cool.
And so, so I really appreciate authors who write for middle grade readers because they're a unique bunch of people,
Yes. And I didn't start off that way. I mean, I started off trying to write a superhero type fantasy book, not really sure the target market, but I had several great authors help me, Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon. I worked with them, and they kind of helped me realize that this is what I should write because it all fit my writing style, the way I thought, the stories, all of that. So writing for middle grade wasn't what I planned. It just is what I was.
Right, right. Well, my own writing is more aimed at the high school crowd, and even now more the new adult. But when I did my prequel, I definitely reached down into the middle grade um, um, genre, because my protagonist is around 13 years old, just at the cusp there. And the two other boys in the book are just a little bit younger than he is. And anyway, they're all on a pirate ship. Anyway,
Nice.
Yeah.
Don't we all wish we could be on a pirate ship?
Right. Well, they were slaves, so maybe not. Anyhow,
right. Okay.
But I really, really appreciate that. So, do you work with kids this age?
I have, and that was where I started discovering my brand. So I was a Girl Scout leader. I was a Boy Scout and Cub Scout leader with my kids, and the girls in my daughter's troop. Had a great time doing all of those. I mean, the girls, they didn't want to just sit and do the cutesy little Girl Scout projects.
Right.
We spent a couple months, and they actually, with hand tools and everything, built a dollhouse, and we donated it to a local
cool
organization that does therapy and stuff for kids. So they loved it. That was the best project. Forget all the badges and all that. They built a dollhouse, and that, what they talk about, that and tracking animals in the snow. And then I was also in martial arts and led some of the kids classes. And so I've always worked with kids. And once my kids got a little older, I stopped doing that. But I think that's just who I am. And that's a large part of what I'm working with my brand and the books and some other things to work with kids.
Right. So I see that you kind of wrote about encouraging writing as a future income stream for kids, I guess.
Yes. That's one of the things I discovered at Jay and Zach again, and also working with James L. Rubart a bit too, discovered that my brand isn't just the books and stories, the fiction. That is one product of the whole brand. And more what my brain is focused on is working with kids and a little bit with their parents to help prepare the kids. And since I'm a computer guy, I've done computer stuff pretty much all my life.
Right.
I see some different things in the world that we're not really preparing our kids for. So a large part of what I'm doing is trying to reach out to parents through some talks, and I'm working on getting some workshops and papers and various things to show them that the kids have options in their future that they could start working on right now. And writing is one of them. Kids that start writing now can actually get things out. There are avenues for them to get things out. And then once they hit the age of 18 and being out of high school, can go to college. There's a lot that go to college. There's some that do a trade, go to trade school. There's some that don't know what they want to do, but any of those choices, they could still write and get a book and have several books. And that's a future job that could keep them some money, regardless of what the work environment is. They're
talking about content creation and as an avenue. I really like that. The students I was working with, that might not have been like a natural thing for them to do, but like one of the girls brought me her short story, and it was a Civil War story, and I didn't expect to, I didn't know what to expect, but the story itself was so well written, and it actually made me cry. It was just that good. And it was like, nice. Wow, this is so magical. And we don't expect that out of our kids, but we should kind of expect that out of our kids.
And kids are great because they don't have the burden of the expectation of, oh my gosh, I should be so much better. They have imagination. They just, let it come out.
Right.
And if they're in 5th, 6th grade or younger, and they start writing and they get some short stories, maybe work up to a book, by the time they're out of high school, their confidence in their writing would be so much higher than if somebody's just starting then, or worse, someone that goes to school for writing or anything else and then waits till they're 23, 24. That it's 5 to 10 years of work before anything really starts happening with a writing career. well, here's a kid that's 18 that could already have that career jump started and going. And that's what I would love to see, is more kids having that, to build their confidence so they can see a future where they have some control, not
I
just,
love
oh my
that.
gosh.
Yeah, no, I love that because many of the people that I work with are older writers, where they've had a career, they've done something else, and they come to it kind of late in life. I myself didn't publish a book until my late 40s, I think. So
Right.
I have to go back
Yeah.
and look at that. And I didn't, I was a teacher, I was a programmer, I worked in real estate, I did all these things as an adult, but I didn't think about writing as something I should be doing until I was a reading teacher. And it was just like, I need to write for these kids because I can write these stories.
Yeah. And a lot of the kids get turned off to reading
Oh,
and writing.
yes.
If they don't read, they're not going to want to write. And some of the books we make them read,
Are awful.
they're awful, and the kids don't connect to them. I'm not saying they're bad books. There's a lot of
I
classics
am.
I love. Well, I'm protecting myself. But if we have books that kids can connect to, for example, one of my favorite authors now that I just discovered in the last couple of years is Jeff Strand. He
Okay.
writes what I kind of describe as adult goosebumps. They're comedy horror for the most part. And I just clicked and connected, and he's written a few YA books, and he
Mhm,
gets teachers that say, you know what, I've got kids, mostly boys, that
mhm.
don't want to read. They hate reading. They don't do it. I gave them your book. They loved it, and they want another one. So who cares?
Fantastic.
Who cares if they're reading uh, Harper Lee,
The Kill a
Kill a
Mockingbird.
Mockingbird? Who cares if they're reading Kill a Mockingbird? If they're going to read this zombie story and love it, that's getting them into reading, not pushing them away by reading To Kill a Mockingbird, which arguably is a great book, has some great stuff in it. But what's it matter if the kids don't listen and don't read it?
If they don't want to read it. Exactly. Well, and, like when I was talking to my seventh and eighth graders who I said, and of course I was trying to teach them to absorb the English language as much as they could. I said, watch the news with the captions on, watch every movie with the captions on, read comic books, please read comic books because they give you so much context in the drawings. Read
Yes.
manga, please just go to the library, get all that stuff with the pictures on the pages, and don't feel bad about reading children's books, and then work up to
Right.
the chapter books and then find something you really like to read. And like for me, it was John Flanagan in his Ranger's Apprentice series that finally turned the key for me. It was like, I love these books. I want to write books like these. And
Nice. Yeah.
so yeah. And the key here is that I was reading with my son and he was into the books. So
Nice.
I was gauging it off of him because I had 3 daughters before that and they were all readers naturally. And so, but he was like, but once he got into it, man, that was it.
Yeah. You got
Yeah.
to find that thing you connect with. And I have friends who the only books they've ever read were the couple they were forced to read in high school or middle school and write a book report. Now I know teachers do that, make them
Mhm.
write a book report to try and get them into reading. But if they're forced to do it and read something they don't like, it doesn't do anything because these people still don't read to this day. But then I have
Right.
other friends who read constantly. I've got a friend that since I've known him back in middle school, he reads 5 to 10 books every single week. He's a fast reader. He reads
Wow.
tons and he goes to the library. He reads everything and he's a huge reader, so I feel that we should find books to get kids interested. If you want them to read A Tale of Two Cities, don't start with A Tale of Two Cities. It's
Right.
150 years old. It can be a little dry and
Oh,
hard to get through. But if you
yeah.
start with a zombie book or a book about kids making a movie, they get into that and they'll discover the other stuff.
I
I like the
absolutely agree with you.
classics.
I
So
absolutely agree with you. I think to write for this age group, you do need kind of a heart for this age group, and you have to be willing to really see the perspective on life and to understand it and tap it. And I don't know that you have to write about protagonists that are this age, but I think you have to somehow get close because
Yeah,
they like to
absolutely.
see themselves in action or just a step ahead. Think about high school, age as well.
Right.
So I see that you have study guides.
Yes, to fit the whole brand, that's part of what I am doing. I'm trying to follow the Common Core. I'm working with a couple
Oh,
teachers
sorry.
and coming up with words to know and some discussion questions. And then also, here's some ideas for writing stories. And I always have a little writing lesson. Beginning, middle, end, what that means and what each part should contain, and working on pronouns and using different parts of the language, but trying to do it in small segments instead of just, you know what? I don't know if there's anybody that has ever really gotten writing lessons learned out of taking a sentence and breaking it
Diagramming
apart,
it.
diagramming it. I understand the need for it, but I think sometimes we focus on that too much, but they haven't really written enough sentences to understand how that all works. Then I feel that at a younger grade, they should just worry about writing, not so much about diagramming and what parts of the sentence are, but write some stories so they have it under their belt and experience. And then when they diagram it, it's like, oh, now I see why that sentence sounds funny, or why I should change that sentence. And why
Right.
I think we do things backwards occasionally.
I do too. I think that possibly it would be in children's best interest to write their 10,000 words,
Yes.
because before we really start hitting the technicalities,
Yeah.
and then they know they have a voice maybe even already developed.
Yes.
Yes, and because that's so important. And how do you know until you've written a lot of words? Um,
Absolutely. Agreed.
yeah. So, so a couple of weeks ago, I talked to Christine Daigle about Vella,
Yes.
Kindle Vella, and she's writing, kind of a horror book and also, well, horror series, I should say, and also science fiction. And like I hear that you're venturing into that. Is it for the
Yes.
same age group or is it for adults?
For the same age group. I'm trying to keep it that.
Wow.
And I'll just say, you mentioned Christine. So
Uh-huh.
for anybody listening to this podcast that listens to some of the other Jay Thorne network of podcasts, I
Right.
will mention Christine has a great serial fiction show with her co-host JP. So for everybody
Right.
listening, there's the JP reference.
I think it's
Um,
called the Serial Fiction
yes,
Show or
yes,
something like
that's
that.
it.
Yes.
Yeah. So I always have liked the old pulp fiction, which, Arthur Conan Doyle and the Cthulhu stories and Sherlock Holmes and all those were done in magazines. A lot of times they were done as a weekly thing or a monthly thing. You get parts of the
Right.
story. And I've always loved those. I like the classic sci-fi stuff from the 50s. I have a small collection. It's a little corny and campy now, but that's kind of what I like.
Right.
So
Right.
I had this idea before Vella even came up that there's a series of books I'm going to be working on and getting out. That's a mystery Scooby-Doo supernatural investigation type thing.
Love it.
And I had this idea to do a serial fiction, put it on my website. Get people coming to the website every week. And I wanted to work again with teachers that, hey, instead of throwing a whole book at your kids and that, how about every week a different installment, and then there could be questions and study guide, and then they're not overwhelmed, and hopefully they like, oh good, it's Monday, let's go get the new episode and
The
see,
new episode.
like it is with, like TV used to be.
Right.
So
Like TV used to be where you
right,
had to have the TV guide.
right. So I have an origin prequel story of those young investigators up that I've been putting on Vella, and working on that. And it's been fun and going fairly well. Now, I don't know if there's a lot of kids in schools and teachers and homeschool parents using
Mhm.
Vella. So I'm just putting it up there as an experiment and to help push myself to get it done. I still want to put it back on my website and offer it as a weekly thing. Maybe they'll all be there, but a study guide to go with it for encouraging teachers, and schedule it every week so it's something. And I've had other ideas which may or may not work, where each week they would basically I know it sounds mercenary, but there are costs involved. But they would sign up for a subscription, and each week I would send the school a vanilla envelope packet printouts
Mhm.
of that week's lesson.
Mhm.
So it's there by Monday. And then like on Thursday, have an online YouTube Q&A or discussion of that week's episode or something like that. And of course, that would be recorded. So next year they could use the ones that are already recorded.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So
they could also, you could do that electronically, maybe save yourself the paper and the postage, but also, it could be also a Patreon model might work too. I'm just
yes,
throwing stuff
yeah,
out
no,
here.
absolutely. And I would agree with the electronic, but everything I see still says that the kids want the physical
Oh,
in the books,
absolutely. I
you
was just
know?
suggesting something that the
Yeah.
teachers would print out.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of homeschool parents that would be great with using digital. They're 2 or 3, 5 kids, maybe they're working on tablets and stuff
Mhm.
anyway. But I think in a school situation, not all schools would have tablets for the kids or the accounts or whatever.
I'm sure
So
you found that for your existing books for middle grade that the paperbacks are what they want.
yes,
They want
absolutely.
that paper book.
Yep.
They,
And I
by
got a
March.
Mac and I got a Mac with Vellum just so I could format
All
the
right.
book and, and get that up because I knew I was going to be doing a lot of paper books and I'm getting some printed. I've got some things I'm trying to do in the local communities and setting up some library. I'm trying to do workshops for some writing along with like an author talk, not just be, I think author
Kind of
talks
an
can be great.
interactive.
Yes, but I tend to think more of the interactive and a teaching thing and hopefully interesting them, and then talk a little bit about the writing in the book, and hopefully it'll start growing from there.
I think you've got a multi-pronged approach. I really like what you're saying as far as building the brand and marketing the work and reaching out to the community. And then if you keep that up, it will grow. It's just, a matter of time
Getting started,
and
yeah.
being persistent. Here's one. I
Okay.
guess the library sessions, do you ever get the chance to talk with parents? And it sounds like that's what kind of that is.
Yes. So again, I think of the books as one of the products of my whole overall brand.
Mhm.
And I've got some talks that I am doing for parents more so than kids. And
Mhm.
it's targeted toward parents of middle schoolers or younger, working up to middle school to introduce them to the future work world. My podcast, I'm going to drop it right here, Discovered Wordsmiths.
Do it.
I interview authors, and
Mhm.
I've got a few kids authors on there, and I try and point to some of those, but I want parents to see that again, that the kids have choices, because I've had a few authors on there that the one lady, she is a comedian. She writes fiction and nonfiction.
Mhm.
She's written a few screenplays and then gotten the money and stuff together to film it herself, just small movies to put on YouTube. So she has multiple things she's doing. And she says, it's great. I don't have anyone telling me what I have to do on any day at any time. And if I want to take my son on vacation in July, well, in March, April, May, I just book more comedy gigs to
To
earn the
help.
money to go on vacation. Whereas, if you have a 9 to 5 job and someone's telling you how much you're going to work, when, and how much you're going to get paid, you don't have that option to do that. And that's yes, I know people always push back. There's downsides to working for yourself, and you have to
Oh yeah.
struggle, and you have to go for all these things, and you have to, I get that. That's why it's an alternative to going to school, to getting a degree, to getting a job, because that is not for everybody. But I understand, leading a entrepreneur life with multiple streams of income isn't for everybody. But I don't think enough parents understand that it is an option. And there are kids out there that would thrive doing that.
Right.
And along with the parent talk about that, I've got a workshop I've been doing to work with kids to teach them video game storytelling for a future career. This is something kind of new. We all think of video games, we think of programmers and maybe some artists and people making these video games. Well, in the last decade or so, narrative storytelling is actually now a job title in the video game world, that they want
Right.
writers to write these stories, and not just stories, the lines that the characters are saying and how it all works together, and tying a story into it. And so this is a job. You don't have to know programming. You don't have to know art. You don't have to know game design itself. They're hiring you to do the story. And this is an alternative to add on to do that. And I talked to a guy on the podcast who teaches at a school that for a video game design degree. And this is a new class, narrative storytelling, that they teach. And he did comics in the 90s. He did video games in the 2000s, and now he's teaching. And he's like, yeah, this is something new that more studios are discovering, and it's ramping up to more people.
Well, it absolutely makes sense. I have played video games, even though I'm of a certain age, but my kids range in age. They have there's a wide gap there. And so I say they keep me young. But what I've noticed in games like, okay, Skyrim, is that based on your decisions, the story can change, but
Yes.
certain things are always going to happen. If you go to a certain place, that's going to happen. But in between, you're making choices and you're talking to different people and they're telling you things and you're gathering information, you're creating your own story. But at the same time, there's a story that has to be there, a framework. Yes. And so it's kind of like choose your own adventure in a way.
Yes.
And I've always been amazed by one of my kids played, and I know one of my older kids played Red Dead Redemption, but I was amazed at the storytelling that was underneath all of that. And I know those are for adults, but it's still amazing what is necessary to make those engaging and keep people coming back and wanting to play it again in a different way to see what will happen, and so that you play it more than once.
And those are examples of really heavy story-based type of interactive RPG adventure type games. Mm-hmm. But even other games, like there's a game called Cuphead, which is kind of an old school
I've heard of that
platformer type ish game, and it doesn't have really much story. It's a little story. And when I talked to Evan, he was called in to help make sure the story worked, because writers not just have the training, it's to make sure there's the right points for a conflict, the right that it makes sense, that things are presented in the right order. Those are as important, and the lines themselves, because a lot of times with video games, especially the ones that have like words on the screen, you got to make it fit. So sometimes you have to adjust sentences so it fits. And then you got games like all the first person shooters that the story is not so much there. It's just, okay, you and your team go and defeat the other guy's team.
Right.
But if you have NPCs, which are non-player characters in there, they may shout lines, and they're like, okay, we need each one of these 100 characters to have 50 different lines for the voice actors to record. And you have to come up with 50 different lines that each character would say unique. And then the voice actors record each of those like a dozen different ways. So you get that variety. So it's little things like that they want storytellers to come in and help do to make it more interesting. Programmers are more limited in that regard. So that's why it's expanding.
Wow. So what, do you write full time, or do you have another like job in real life? I would say.
Yeah, in real life, I still do computer programming, mostly consultant work, and I write when mornings, evenings, weekends, and I try and get the workshops. It's a lot.
It is
especially with the podcast and everything else. So I get that all in, but I've been writing for several years. I've got several things built up. I need to finish a few things, but I've got several different books and series ready to go and come out, get them finished up. So over the next couple of years, it's going to be like from 0 to 60 very
That's
quickly.
So exciting though. That's great.
Yeah.
No, that's great. My first career was in systems engineering. And so back with the EDS and mostly business, of course. So, but I've been amazed and excited by the growth of IT and what all that means to
Yeah.
us in everyday life now. And so, we just we take this internet thing is ubiquitous, the browsers and all that. But I remember when it didn't exist.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
got to see the whole thing grow, and I've just been so excited by it. And I tried to keep my hand in, do my own websites and stuff like that. So
And I found a lot of the interviews I've done with other authors, there are a lot of computer people that are turning to writing for their creativity, that there's more creativity sometimes in programmers than you would realize. And I also found that a lot of writers also do things like play music. Uh, or the comedian, other creative endeavors too. It's not just the one thing writing. Not that doesn't pertain to everybody, obviously, but I just found it interesting that there's more than I would have anticipated.
oh no, that's definitely true. I think you have to use both sides of your brain when you're programming. I really do.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I think that's why it's attractive to musicians, it's attractive to artists and writers. And well, I consider those the same thing, all those things the same thing, but
Right.
you have to use the artistic side to do the analytical side and to bring the thing together to make a friendly system for users to use. So I think it's related, definitely.
Yeah, the creatives definitely. It's interesting though, all the analytical minds that have the creativity juice. You always think of those as two
Absolutely.
separate things, but it's really not.
No. So like all you school people out there, you keep those creative programs going, because that's where the that's where the brilliance comes out.
Right. Right.
Keep those things going. The art and music programs, you just gotta anytime they talk about cutting those, I go, oh, don't do that.
I know. Oh,
hurting
that's a
yourself.
whole discussion right there.
It is. It is. It is. Well, I so appreciate you coming on the program. I'm going to keep it, about this link, because I like people to be able to listen to it on their way to town.
Nice. Yep.
Yeah, here we don't measure in distances, we measure in time
Right.
in this area. So,
Well, yeah, that sounds like a Doctor Who thing. So
that's right. That's right. I'm not going to claim to go back in time, but yesterday. Anyway, thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate it. Is there any place that you would like to send people?
my website, keep changing, adding, updating, sa-schneider.com. I know Schneider is not the easiest to spell. I'm looking to get something else, but it works. And I've got some resources on there for parents and teachers, and I keep adding more, and I'm getting links to the stories and books that are going out. And
Excellent.
I've got updates on talks and where I'm giving them. And so hopefully, as every month goes by, there's updates and changes and more things on there.
Well, you've really set the bar high with writing for Vella. Because that'll really keep you busy.
Right. Well, the good news is I started with like 16 chapters already written.
That helps.
So yeah.
Oh, I feel like that's the way it ought to be in podcasting too. I'm always on I'm always on the cutting edge. How's that?
Got it. Yeah, understand that.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephen. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kathrese.
Your first chapter is your only chance to hook a new reader. Your only chance to get an agent or a publishing contract. Is your first chapter ready? Be confident. What if you had a resource to help you figure out the strengths and weaknesses of your first chapter? An objective, informative rubric to go by. Don't leave things to chance. You get one opportunity, and your first chapter needs to be irresistible. The first chapter rubric will help you identify the problem areas in your first chapter and figure out how to fix them. Get your free first chapter rubric at firstchapterrubric.com. Be ready for queries, be ready for readers, and get the results you dream about. Go to firstchapterrubric.com and get your copy today.